Welcome to Seeing This, the movie podcast where we deliver the latest movie reviews, celebrate our favorite movie anniversaries, compete in competitive movie drafts that Adrian does all of his cahoots in, but we won't get into that, and much, much more. I'm the movie Mamba, Mike Ornelas, and when I turned 18, there was an option, either snakebite piercing or a tattoo. I'm happy to report I went with the tattoo. Joining me on the podcast is the feisty Pisces, Erica McMullen.
2 words, collective consciousness.
Also on the podcast is the Gerber baby-faced assassin, Adrian Cedeno.
What a hole.
And that's all in reference to today's special episode on the documentary, A Body to Live In, where we'll be talking BDSM and spirituality. Stick around after our discussion to hear my conversation with director Angelo Madsen, where we talk about his intrigue of the subculture and dive into the unique life of Fakir Musafar. When I interviewed and opened with him, I accidentally said Farik Musafar, but we get that corrected early on in the interview. Stick around and you'll see that. Let's start with the count. Piercing count. Erica, how many do you have?
Wait.
Just got to think about it, folks.
Wait, hold on.
For our audio listeners, she's thinking.
No.
9. And you don't have to go into detail, but are those all on your ear?
No.
And your nose? And your nose?
No.
No. Okay. Adrian, what's your piercing count?
0. I've had 2. I've had my ears pierced, but those got infected and we let those go.
You did have your ears pierced. How old were you for those ones?
Somewhere around 17. My wife did them with like needles and ice cube.
Wow, right on brand for this episode here.
Yeah.
0 for me. Like I mentioned, I went with my buddy Dave, who we've talked about. Shout out Dave. And he went to get snake bite piercings under the lip. And I was about to do that. And I think we ran out of time or something. I forgot what
I've always
happened.
been fascinated with snake bites. I won't get them because the mouth for me is not really my thing. But I've always been intrigued by them for sure.
Yeah, it was a close call. And then the Tattoo Expo came to LA County Fair like the following week.
Nice.
And I got my first tattoo then. Yeah, for sure. And then shout out Coco Jenkins, who I talked about, months ago now when I went to Vegas and I talked about, we did kind of like a weed tasting and all that, if you guys recall that. She has her tongue split.
Oh,
so she has like the snake tongue thing going on. Pretty gnarly. But before we get into our full discussion about this very unique, very intriguing documentary, I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. Some news. Season 3 is on the horizon. By the end of June, we should be wrapping up season 2, which will be our 100th official episode. And season 3 has a few things coming in. We're going to have new music because I'm still kind of dealing with copyright stuff. So just to avoid all that,
we will have new music. It was too good of a jam. Like they don't want us to have it anymore.
Too good of a jam. It says that the copyright holder, even though it's a royalty-free song, allows it on like YouTube. But once we make it big in season 3 and start monetizing, we might run into some issues. So let's nip that in the butt now. We're gonna have a new logo as kind of a fresh start. These first 2 seasons.
You said nip that in the bud, right?
No, he said but it's bud.
Bud.
What if I want to nip it in the butt?
No,
you nip it in the bud of the flower or the bud of the whatever.
I'm nipping it in the butt. Wait, the way I said that now that I understand.
See?
Okay,
I was gonna correct Chad the other podcast too, because Chad said something about chomping at the bit, and it's not. It's champing at the bit, but it's all good.
Listen, that's why you come here to Seeing This, folks. You learn something every day. Our English majors over here. So we're going to also rebrand our logo, have it fresh. These first 2 seasons have been great, but we've grown some wings here and want to take things to the next level. And that also includes, we mentioned it briefly last episode, our bingo card, where you folks can have that by your side, listen along our episode. And there's
we should
so
do like
much
a poll too, like what do you think in the next episode is going to be crossed off or something like that?
like a
guess what's
predictive
going to be
bingo.
said
I like that.
next. and you get
Look at
like
that. We're just full
a
of
little voucher, like a 10% off coupon or something.
correct. We putting me on the spot to promise discounts to merch. I love it.
5%. My bad.
Yeah. No. We'll make it work. But the bingo card will have different squares on things we may say or do on the podcast that tend to happen relatively frequently, unintentionally. So keep an eye out for that. And we are also going to launch some new rebranded merch. So what does that mean about the old merch? Well, if you've got it already, incredible collector items. They're going to be incredibly rare because they will be discontinued come July for season 3. But between now and that time, we're going to have a special discount code that will be available in our monthly newsletter. So sign up now, seeingthispod.com/subscribe.
Look
Sign
at
up
that
for
marketing, you guys. Love it.
So for our June newsletter, there'll be a 15% discount code in there. So I'm upping your 10%
Y'all, I was
since you
being
put me on
such
the
a
spot.
cheapskate, you guys. No wonder Michael's in charge.
So, well, we'll see. We're pretty much giving it away for free after all the production costs, but it's all right. We love to do it. Seeingthispod.com, subscribe, follow us on our socials, Seeing This Pod, and go to our website, seeingthispod.com for everything, including episodes, interviews, merch, written reviews, all the things. A Body to Live In. Let's dive in.
Have you seen this?
Have you seen this?
Have you seen this?
I know, I've seen this. I know this.
Adrian, get us started with the letterbox description of this documentary. What do you got?
Directed by Angelo Madsen. A Body to Live In offers an uncompromising look at the rise of BDSM performance art, body modification, and the modern primitives cultural movement through the agonies and ecstasies of transgressive artist Fakir Musafar and the communities that surrounded him. Blending rare archival footage with the voices of queer and artistic trailblazers, the film shows how pain, ritual, and transformation became tools of identity, survival, and self-expression. Weaving from early experiments and secret gatherings to the emergence of a global subculture shaped by the AIDS crisis and spiritual reinvention, director Angelo Madsen reveals not just the story of one artist, but a collective history of bodies in revolt, asking what it truly means to live freely in one's own skin.
What a description. I might be able to get the full trailer as B-roll for that one. Thanks for that description, Adrian. Very interesting. I was very curious what your guys' takeaways would be from this film, and your opening lines are telling. So, Erica, ladies first, why don't you kick us off with what did you think about A Body to Live In?
Okay, so for starters, had no idea what this film was about. All Michael told us was like, I really want to do an episode. I got a screener. Let's watch this. However, once I got into it, I've actually have heard of this movement before. A friend of mine, friend, colleague, old boss, his mom's lived in the Bay Area during that time. I've never heard stories about this particular movement, but like it's been mentioned in other stories and other movements that they have been a part of. Yeah, his moms have like crazy stories. So I kind of like already knew that like this movement existed, but to the extent of like what they were practicing and how they were practicing and the journey didn't really have any context. It's so human. Like it's just so unbelievably down to the core what every human like is craving, and that's like I said in my beginning thoughts, like collective conscious. How can I be surrounded by like-minded people who want to achieve the next level? And I don't know, I loved watching it. I loved how uncomfortable certain scenes were to me because I was like, oh, I really need to focus on that and address that because obviously like there's something going on in my mind where I'm not comfortable with this, which is wild because it's just storytelling, right? So it definitely made me search inner and deeper to kind of see, okay, like what what made me uncomfortable about this and why did it make me uncomfortable, to learn about
Interesting.
certain things. Yeah, because it's like that would never be my first reaction to anything like that. Like I said, I have 9 piercings of my own. So like I've been in that realm of talking to people with unique tattoos or unique piercings, and I've been in a town where like everything from A to Z is accepted. So to feel that uncomfortableness, I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is like a new thing about
Mm.
myself that I get to explore. And I love when a documentary can do that for me.
I love that. To be honest, I was expecting that more maybe from Adrian. Full disclosure. Well, I just mean, I mean in the sense of, I don't know anything about you. Like you've never mentioned anything about piercings or like this kind of body play, if you will. And I was curious how you were going to feel about it. So we'll jump right to you, Adrian. What did you think of the film?
It was definitely interesting. There was a lot going on. I do remember this movement. I remember seeing Fakir on some daytime talk show.
Mhm.
I remember him like in the 90s seeing this whole movement going on, and not really understanding or realizing what was happening. This time, like Erica said, like if a documentary can move you to something, like it's a good one. This one kind of moved me in a different direction than kind of what I would have expected in the first 10 minutes of it.
Hmm.
But I gotta say, I was a little offended. Like, I don't know why you guys thought I wasn't gonna like this is a
Adrian.
kind of a traumatic. This is gonna be a traumatic documentary of all
Okay, I
documentaries.
don't know
Like,
that I would use the words traumatic, but I would have
Right.
definitely expected a very extreme response from you. Whether that was good or
so
bad or neutral,
yeah.
like you would have been very firm in whatever you felt about it.
So I
That's definitely
am.
what I was expecting from you.
I definitely am. It changed my outlook on certain things like cultural appropriation.
Hmm.
Like I really went down a hole with that one. How he was kind of like oblivious to the whole notion that this was a type of cultural appropriation, that people were like condemning him for it. Like, you're not Native American. You shouldn't be practicing those things, right? It's not a spiritualness inside of you. And he just kind of like had this look, and it like kind of, I glossed over it, right? But by the time I got to the end of it, I revisited it. Like, what that really hit and struck a chord, right?
Hmm.
I feel like a cultural appropriation is a big thing right now, where people are saying like, oh, you can't, it's cultural appropriation if you take this notion, this aspect of whatever said culture, and use it towards your benefit, towards your sales, towards your everything, right? And then it dawned on me like, man, I've probably been a part of that, right? I've probably contributed to that in some ways. And then I thought, it's complete crap. Like, it's like Erica said, it's totally human. It's so human
Hmm.
to like think that one people can own a spiritualness or spirituality or whatever somebody actually feels, that they can say like, oh, that you can't do that because it's ours, because we were the first to do that. We were the first to do piercings and it was spiritual. So guess what? That's our culture. You can't
Hmm.
do it.
Yeah, I mean it's a fine line because you have appropriation and you have appreciation, right? So like uh, I get so tongue tied with this because you do want everyone to experience those types of, whether that be euphoria, nirvana, out of body
Hmm.
experience, however you want to see it. There's plenty of ways to achieve that. I think for me, the appropriation comes from like the names that he was like, oh, this is a sun dance. Well, hold on a second. Like, you didn't come up
Hmm.
with that. Your ancestors didn't come up with that. And I think the lack of respect there is where people got upset with him. The reason I find it difficult is because it was still such an exploration for him and he didn't really know how to go about it without culturally appropriating something else,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm. No, definitely. And I love that you guys are taking this discussion that way, because that aspect of the film is maybe
Like
5% of
a
it.
small
You know what I
mention,
mean?
very
And
small.
stick around for the interview, because I do bring that up to Angelo, and he was very gracious in including that in the documentary, because he could have very easily just
Yeah.
avoided that whole aspect of it. But even though it was a smaller part of this documentary, it leads to such discussion or
Yeah.
such exploration and philosophical thought around it. And it's got a lot of graphic imagery as far as like extreme piercing, body
Yeah.
hanging, things of this nature. So when and if you check out this film, just keep that in mind. This is your cue for your trigger warning,
Yeah.
Erica.
No, yeah, 100%. And I think maybe that's what made me uncomfortable is like, I don't mind the pain aspect of things. I think I don't like seeing other people in pain, so I think that was, like,
Mm,
really difficult for me to, like, wrap my head around of, like, I'm supposed to sit back and allow, like, their pain to happen. Like, that I think that for
mm.
me was really hard because I don't really like to see people in pain. I know that that's a problem that I do take that on as a responsibility, and I'm sure me and my therapist are gonna be talking about that next week.
I love that. I love
But,
that.
like,
Well,
like, those are the feelings that this documentary, like, gave to me, like, a lot of questions that I definitely had to ask myself throughout the whole thing.
You
I
know what? I didn't see a lot of pain. Like, I know besides them glossing over like this, like, hey, pain is just the fastest way to achieve that spiritualness. It doesn't, like, they're not outwardly expressing a whole lot of pain. Like, there's no agonizing yelling.
It bothered me.
Yeah. I think that since we're on the topic of pain, that's a good time for me to bring in my special
I
guest,
feel like
who
this let me before you play it,
go ahead, please.
men ain't shit.
There it is. You guys are both on brand. There you guys are. With that being said, I have a special guest here today, Steve Carell in the 40-year-old virgin as Andy. And then I figured Adrian, even like the character Jay, is kind of how I thought you were going to react. But nonetheless, this is a good example of what some of the thoughts I had while I was watching the film. So let me bring him in right now.
¿Cómo se llama? No, Kelly Clarkson.
Yo, y'all done or y'all?
Oh,
That's fucked
shit.
up.
Oh,
Oh, that's fucked up.
wow. I hate you. I hate you. Stop smiling, you jerk.
See,
There's
Oh,
Erica.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't.
Oh, not the nipple.
Not the nipple.
Not the nipple.
Not
please.
the nipple.
Please, Cal. hold my
Holred's
hand.
like trying not to
Hold
laugh.
my goddamn hand, man. Do it. Just hold. Okay, here we go. Ooh, 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 no. Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, nipple fuck.
There are definitely
I
moments when
can't.
I was seeing some of the BDSM body hanging, or like even the corset that is like really shrinking the
My
waist.
God,
Like
the way he trained himself, like, unreal.
like I feel like, to Adrian's point, as far as expressing pain, I feel like we, the audience, or I'll speak for myself, was like feeling that. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't imagine trying to do some of the things that happened in this
There were
documentary.
times where, like, the image of him and it wouldn't be the corset, he would have, like, already wrapped himself with, like, some kind of material that he just, like, was training to shrink his waist. Every time a scene like that came on, I felt myself, like, struggling to breathe, and I was like, "What is happening right now?" Like, this is insane. Like, the lengths that he was willing to go to try to achieve that, and then even I don't know if we like spoilers or we didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
For our documentary,
Yeah, okay,
it's
cool.
open game. Yeah.
And then even when his partners were talking about like that Lutheran background of like still making him feel like guilty about that. Like I just wonder, like in those moments, like where he is like almost close to like achieving that state that he was trying to get to, like what actually
Yeah.
like did he feel deep down inside? Like what were the emotions that he was going to? Because it does seem like throughout a lot of his life he still was carrying a lot of guilt.
Well, what's great about the structure of the documentary as well, just to talk about that aspect, is it does cover, Fakir's life from when he first starts exploring this back in the 60s
Yeah.
By
to all the
himself in a dark basement,
Like
in a photo.
could have just
and
died.
and
Yeah.
he's an artisan himself, like with the photos he would take, and I think Angelo mirrors. I mean, he's an artist himself, but I think he mirrors that style of art or like photography in the documentary itself. Like the way it's constructed feels like a display itself. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Like an
Um,
exhibition.
Correct. Or so, like in a museum, it'd be in an exhibit.
Yeah.
And what I appreciated is, to your point, where like, how did he feel? We kind of see his journey over the decades to the point where he does get called out about like appropriation or like you're not Native American, these things. And I agree with you, Adrian. It seemed as if it didn't even dawn on him. Like he thought he was doing well, like he was doing something good because people needed this type of healing. And just, I appreciated that we eventually did get some women's perspective, including his wife, some of the things that they would do for healing, sounded, sounded quite intense.
His wife
So
has got to be the coolest chick I've ever heard. She was like, do you want to stick your finger in my fleshy holes? And she's like, yeah, of course. Why not?
right, like what a hole. But yeah, I thought as a whole it's a really well done documentary, considering what it's going for, just considering what it's covering. And something I asked Angelo once we finished recording that I was hoping I should have thought of while we were talking, but I could talk about it now, was a lot of it is archival footage, right? And archival interviews, specifically with Fakir. And he mentioned all the interviews with Fakir are archival, but when there's interviews with the elders, that's Angelo having conversations with him. So
Yeah.
when you watch this documentary, something to keep in mind as you progress through it. Since we have the interview on the back half of this, let's jump to our Commodus Scale. Up, even, or down? Erica, where are you going?
I'm gonna go thumbs up. This is just art. Like this is, regardless of how you feel about the movement, if you were alive and remember it, if you're new to learning it, it's so important to know that these movements exist, whether they are controversial in the times that they happen for the cultural appropriation or just for the audacity of the whole thing. Um, Art's important. It's important to know the history of like where things came from and the sacrifices that were made. I mean, we learned that a lot of people during that movement like died. There was a lot of disease going around that we just didn't have answers for quite yet. And so, I think it's really important to watch films like this. So I'm gonna give it a thumbs up for sure. I really enjoyed it.
I love that. It's a great progression of like the education of health and practice and spirituality and all that, from essentially the beginning, at least from like a Western American perspective, and kind of how that's evolved to where we are now in the different ways these things are practiced. Adrian, where are you going?
Thumbs up. It was a gnarly documentary for sure. Like you guys said, I took it as art the entire time. I mean, it starts off with that tone and kind of sets the tone like this is art, and no matter what, it's performance art, regardless of what came off of it, like Satanism and all that stuff. That like they kind of
They do
highlight
touch on
real
that.
quick.
Shout out to yourself.
It is art, like for sure it was art. And it was definitely interesting. It's definitely something that pioneered the life that we have now. I'm interested in getting tattoos. Like we all get tattoos, we all get piercings, and just the science. they didn't go through and have the whole AIDS crisis, the entire industry could have been a problem.
Yeah.
So it definitely changed the entire industry, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thumbs up as well. I went down a rabbit hole of research on Angelo, and he has a lot of projects out already, and they all sound incredibly intriguing. I'd suggest to both of you, as well as our viewers, listeners, to check out some of his other projects because they sound just as fascinating. So they're definitely on the top of my watch list as well. Really glad I got to speak with him. Before we get to the interview, though, double feature recommendation. It's an interesting movie to pair what you can do a double feature with, but I am curious on your guys' thoughts. Yeah, we'll stick with Erica. Let's ladies first. Still, we'll keep it going that way. What would you pair with this?
I don't know if I've already paired this movie, but I went more. Did 2 movies. Pulling a Michael right now.
There it is. Triple feature, baby.
It's more of like you can decide like which route you want to go down, because both of the movies that I chose are very cult-like, and this film, regardless of how you felt about it and the movement, it did feel very cult-like. As far as just kind of like how they were doing things, how they were connecting spiritually. Cult feels like a terrible word because it always has a negative connotation. But with that being said, I would either recommend Midsummer or Rosemary's Baby. Obviously, it's fuck Roman Polanski, but probably one of the greatest horror movies to ever exist. Very much reflects maybe some things that are happening within Hollywood and our governments and people in charge. So, would highly recommend both of those movies.
You did recommend Midsummer,
I think,
for the Honora Oscars, 90s Oscars episode.
Let's go with Rosemary's Baby though. Let's do that because it's just like the way they practice things and the way it's kind of low key. It's very much a horror movie, so it's definitely not in the same line, but I went more of like the culty route kind of thing.
Sure, from a cult perspective.
Yeah.
Hot take. I saw Rosemary's Baby, I think last year.
For the first time?
First time. And my hot take?
That's crazy.
It's a 1-star movie.
It's not, Michael.
I get a 1-star. That's fine. Listen, I get it. Sometimes, sometimes, I'm critical, but I just felt like a lot doesn't happen in that movie. But nonetheless, John Cassavetes in it as an actor, and I love his films. So that's who got the 1-star for me. Adrian, let me know in your comments. Rosemary's Baby, overhyped, appropriately hyped, or underhyped? Let us know. Adrian. Adrian, what would you pair with this?
So I had a hard time thinking of something that would kind of go along with this. And for some reason, this movie popped in my head only because of piercings. And there's one scene where like he's getting the piercings ripped out of his face. The Punisher from 2004, directed by Jonathan Hensley. You mentioned like 1-star movies. This is probably close to a 1-star movie that's actually like 3-4 stars.
Okay.
It's so bad that it's good kind of a thing, and just it's a nostalgia for a comic book. But yeah, just for that one scene where they're ripping his piercings out, trying to get him to talk, and the pain that he's going through. Yeah.
Gnarly. New Punisher out now also on Disney Plus. I guess I shouldn't do free ads for Disney, but nonetheless, if you want to check that out,
nothing for Disney for free.
I would recommend a documentary called Baraka. I have it back here on the wall. And have either of you seen this movie? Adrian shaking his head.
You're gonna have to remind me because I never remember the names of documentaries.
It is essentially a non-narrative documentary that is just capturing moving images across the world and across cultures. And it has, it covers various indigenous tribes, Amazonian tribes, animals.
Seen it. I just haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah. It's
from
really
the 90s, right? 1992?
Yeah, that sounds right. Let's see. 1992. Correct. But we could. I mean, I usually put the movie up on our
Yeah,
post,
yeah.
but
Okay, yeah.
super cool. Covers 24 different. Sorry, I'm talking away from the mic. Covers 24 different countries, and it's very much an art piece. Where by the time, and it covers like even in timing of society and how it's evolved to these like indigenous tribes to the industrial capitalistic world that we're in now without any like narrative words, and it's very much left up to interpretation the way great art is. So if you haven't seen Baraka, definitely seek that out. I think it especially if you're a little toasty and you watch that one, it's definitely a fun view. It's a fun view. But nonetheless, stick around as we go to our interview with Angelo Madsen, and then come back Monday because it's Erica's favorite episode that will be launching, which is the 25th anniversary of Shrek. Out in theaters this week. So as of today,
We're
Friday.
in theaters. I know not everyone.
So Regal.
Yeah.
So Regal is putting out this in theaters. So you have a chance to watch it over the weekend and then come join us Monday
just
as
really hope I get a certain type of theater people.
Sure.
That's
I don't know
say
how it
on
is.
that because that's just my favorite experience.
I'm up here in the Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington area, and there's only 3 theaters showing it, and all the screenings are like at 11:30 or 2:30. So it's not a night crowd, which is interesting. I don't know if that's the case for you guys.
It's
down
a night
there.
crowd down here.
Oh yeah. Cool. Either way, we're gonna have a lot of fun. So check that out on Monday. But now let's go to my interview with director, writer, artist, producer Angelo Madsen. And that's it. There you go. No, peace. I'm very intrigued and delighted to be joined by writer, director, producer, artist Angelo Madsen, whose documentary, A Body to Live In, explores the world of BDSM performance art and body play with a focus on the transgressive artist Fakir Musafar, who experimented with and built a community around piercings and tattoos with lasting impacts that we see even today. Angelo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
There's so many layers to your documentary, and it's truly quite fascinating. When did you first learn about Farik, and at what point did you decide to dedicate a film focusing on his life, BDSM performance art, and what about him led you to want to focus your energy on this project?
Yeah, I'll just say his name is Fakir. Fakir Musafar.
Fakir, I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. Uncommon name, which he actually chose for himself as a collage of Sufi mysticism and some other ideas which informed his practice. I first found out about his work. I had seen an issue of the Modern Primitives Research publication in the early 2000s, maybe like 2002. And there was a lot of publications going around that time if you were kind of interested in punk culture, underground stuff, queer stuff, anarchist stuff, kink stuff, underground art stuff. It was a pretty rich subculture still then, and research publications was sort of at the foreground of that. They came out with Search and Destroy magazine, which was a punk magazine in the 90s, or maybe before then, even 80s. And so long legacy of kind of just putting out countercultural material. When they started doing the bigger publication issues, those were all over the place. So like there was the Bob Flanagan book, there was Industrial Culture Handbook, there was Angry Women, there's the Annie Sprinkle book, Performance Artist book. And I found out about the work that way. I met him a couple years later. I was collaborating with someone who was working with Cleo at these erotic dominance workshops, intensives she was teaching in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. And so I actually got to know Cleo before I even met Fakir. And then I met her through him, and I didn't really put together that he was a modern primitives guy, but until a little later. But I did see his monograph, Spirit Plus Flesh, a little bit later, maybe 2004 or 5. And that was the only kind of monograph of his photography that was ever released. And I was really taken with the images. Really, really gorgeous photographs, and particularly the photographs that were self-portraits, were really, really rich and compelling to me. And so, I was collaborating in these like erotic dominance intensive workshop environments, and with, you know, queer kink community in Chicago where I was living at the time, going back and forth. And I was in art school also. And so, I mean, those things are pretty like direct correlation. More abstractly, in terms of things I'm interested in, almost all of my work is driven by some kind of like interest in figuring out how people structure belief systems in their lives, and how people make meaning from belief systems, uh, and their own relationships. So their own kind of like fantasy structures, belief systems, but then they're also the way they believe in the humans in their lives. And so a lot of my films are about these kinds of relationships that untangle, from very messy angles. I like messy angles. So yeah, I started working on the film. I mean, I was involved with BLW for a window of time and some other organizations that we were overlapping in. I didn't start working on the film until his cancer diagnosis in 2018. And then it was kind of late in the game, and so real research on the film didn't start until 2019. And so he
Wow.
passed away a few months before we really kind of dove into things. Um, yeah, and then I just made the film between 2019 and it released in 2005 at True Falls Film Festival.
A lot of the imagery is quite engulfing and definitely captures your attention. And I'm curious because your documentary consists of mostly archival footage and it's quite
Yeah.
captivating in itself. Can you speak to how you go about writing this documentary, constructing it? Do you already have a point A to point B in mind for the storyline, or is that something that you
Yeah.
discover through the edit?
Both. And with this film, I had certain sets of issues that are of most interest to me. So firstly, this is not comprehensive, in any way, shape, or form. Like if you want a comprehensive survey of the history of body piercing, you'd have to read like someone's 800-page dissertation, which hasn't really been written yet. Like this has not gotten this corner of counterculture has not gotten its academic attention yet, shall we say. I mean, there's a few people. I shouldn't say that. Like Matt Lauder in the UK, Amber Gillian Muster in the US, Amelia Jones, Andy Campbell. There's some people that are talking about this stuff. But in terms of the actual survey and the history of body piercing, it's not a super, hotbed academic topic. In terms of arranging archival materials, I had to come in with my set of interests, and for me, given my interests that are already in place about community, relationships, world building situations, I was really invested in how body modification as a movement was dovetailing with the grief culture of AIDS and HIV in the 90s. And so, and Fakir's own death, and thinking about this sort of pipeline or growth pattern biography of someone's life, as and body modification as preparation for death, as a sort of grief process. And so that's an idea that sort of guided a lot of my choices with the film. Of course, super interested in the photography and the performance art because those are also close to me. But, for example, there's very little information about contemporary suspension culture because that's not one of my areas of interest,
Sure.
So, like, there's a lot of, like, suspenders that are like, why didn't you talk more about suspension? I was like, I don't really care about suspension, It's interesting for sure, but I'm interested in all these things as they intersect with these other fields of interest. And so in terms of having those predefined sets of interests, I definitely tailor my research to those sets of interests. The relationships that build, the way communities and subcultures are sort of like intersecting and diverging from each other this whole time, is guiding the research. But I also look for visual coherency, visual juxtaposition. So like if I see an image that I feel really attracted to and I don't know why, I'm definitely going to flag it. I don't need to know why I'm attracted to it. Doesn't matter. I'm sure I'll be able to, like, if it's really, really pulling at me, I'll be able to get it in there somehow. And I did that with plenty of images where I can kind of just construct narrative around them because they really are still images. And the film is really, guided by this like vocal cacophony, a chorus, if you will, of these elders that are all kind of sharing stories together. And that opens up a lot of space for the images to become narrative in a way they maybe aren't intentionally narrative or intended to be, but can be when juxtaposed with something else.
You know, you say it's not comprehensive, which that may be true, but you do cover a lot of ground as far as the decades you cover and the different kind of corners or pockets of this performance art or spiritual therapy, even, if you will. And I found it riveting to learn about Gauntlet that opened in the 70s and essentially offered piercings to people anywhere that they pleased on their body.
Yeah.
Based on this process of research or even your own experiences, how would you say that the BDSM performance art or body play has evolved over the years and to the point of how it's practiced today?
I think it's really hard to talk about that because there's so many different niches of this work. There's the kind that happens in museums and galleries. There are the kinds that happens in clubs as demonstrations. And then there's the kinds that cross-pollinate. And I think that not every performance work that happens in a club or part of kink community is for a broader audience, and some is, and some is being conceptualized within the discourse of performance art and therefore somehow maybe more appropriate for a museum or gallery environment, and like some is not being contextualized within the discourse of performance art, and sometimes that makes it better. It's like it's not involved with the discourse, it's on its own terms. I think there's tons of people making this kind of work today that are functioning on their own terms. And so, I mean, I don't know. I just like we have a great kink orgs in New York City, and I just saw great performance events over the summer where there was a bunch of queer kinksters doing like durational performance work, a la Ron Athey, like a la Bob Flanagan. Like I think there's really direct pipelines that are still super active.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point because when I lived in San Francisco for some time, and when, kink.com was operating out of the Armory there in San Francisco, got to do a tour there. And it's just all these different kind of, again, like the spectrum of the art. And I love the juxtaposition you have in the film of it being, when this is done in like a quote unquote circus-like setting, that it's more socially acceptable. But if it happens, in the privacy of one's home or a club, it can be considered immoral or corrupt. What would you say is the biggest misconception of the practice that people from the outside just get wrong?
I think the biggest misconception is that there's some sort of like idea or framework around like what it means to be like hardcore, and part of what the film does that circumvents that is that it really kind of like draws out the tenderness and the way that relationships are really cultivated over time. People don't just one day wake up and decide to put hooks in their back, and like hang from them. That's just not how it works. And so, and not only that, but like the process of then identifying someone who has the sanity, the safety, the skill sets to be able to engage that kind of practice, and then figuring out what your body needs to actually be able to then sustain that kind of practice. Like these are really slow processes that take deep consideration. Part of what we love about the image of BDSM is that hardcore-ness, right? Like that's imagery, that's iconography. It's not a it's not an instructional how-to, right? Seeing some like hardcore sex scene or whatever on porn is not a how-to. In the same way that like, watching an episode of Law and Order with a, like whatever, like this shit is not like movies and TV and culture are not a how-to, So trying to kind of soften that in a way to invite people into some of the tenderizing parts of this work, and thinking about it as an extension of any other myriad kinds of body practices people engage in that break their bodies down to rebuild something new. So, like, yes, there's injury involved with this. There's also overcoming injury involved with this, which is what weightlifters do. It's what long distance runners do. It's what people who meditate do. So trying to sort of like just destigmatize this a little bit to be like, how is this actually that different? Yeah, but then also just like foregrounding how much true intimacy and trust you need with someone to be able to engage this. Like, this is really like people who want to play with limitations of emotional capacity, intellectual capacity, physical capacity. Like, this is an incredible pipeline to those things.
And I really appreciate that you mentioned, not just now, but in the documentary about community and the intimacy of it and the trust. And also that you include the perspective of the American Indians or the native tribes, considering that it is like a healing ritual aspect. I'd just love to get your thoughts around the idea of being inspired by global cultural traditions versus being considered a form of appropriation or misrepresentation, which can ultimately lead to walking that fine line of it being considered, even cultish. Anything that kind of has a spiritual shell around it can get that stigma. I just love your thoughts about that kind of philosophy and that debate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super hard because like everything comes from somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Like we don't make anything up. Everything comes from somewhere. Someone else did it before us. And it's a human precondition to want to have some sort of connection with other. And I don't mean other like, indigeneity. I mean other like higher power, right?
Right.
So like there's these natural human drives to want those things. And so I think it's dangerous to demonize the desire for those kinds of things, but I think it's also dangerous to not have a sense of critical reflection of positioning, and where you're coming from. And I think during the time he was discovering these things, like people were not thinking about their positionalities in the world yet. And I think he was, made a lot of like bad decisions, said a lot of dumb shit, and really upset a lot of people. And I think he was also a very rigid thinker, you know? And so, at the time when he was being challenged on a lot of these ideas in the 80s, when he like blew up, right? So like essentially this shit happened kind of overnight. Like he was living in secret for so long, doing these things in secret for so long, having such fetishistic desire, but also so ambitious, so driven, and so profoundly producing, like just so prolific, making so much work and giving so much energy to this. And then as soon as it blew up and he was like, I can share this with people now, it was like slam. And so I think he was just like busted by it. I think he was kind of broken by it and couldn't really recover from it. And I think that's why he sort of developed this kind of spiel that he does. He also dug his heels in to the discourse of like, this comes from someplace else. And that made it worse. Like he thought he was like, he thought he was kind of like doing the right thing by being like, I want to make sure people know like this comes from like the Taipusam tradition in Southeast Asia, or this comes from indigenous American Indian traditions, or this comes from Sufi mysticism, or this comes from paganism, or what. He was very like trying to point to these things as if that was, the balm or the salve to the wound, when that really just aggravated it was salt on the wounds because it didn't actually address the entitlement around it, right? So like it addressed the historicity from a white perspective, on his terms, and then it didn't actually address the entitlement to the practices and to be able to call them what they're called by these people. So it's kind of an interesting kind of clusterfuck in some ways. And also like I try really hard to like not absolve him from this behavior, but also to like hold all of the different kinds of monstrosity together. And I think about like gender in that same bag, like not, at this point in time, like we have a really strong kind of like trans queer community that are seeing themselves reflected in all these different ways. But if I think about it, like if people were watching this in the 1940s, the monstrosity would not be the Sundance. The monstrosity would be the freak in a corset and high heels.
Yeah, right.
And so I try to just like shift my thoughts about history a little bit, like not to apologize or forego, but to like position like what would have been the sort of like cultural window people were looking through. And he was, he was born in 1930, so like he's literally like a depression baby. Like in South Dakota in a little tiny town. And he brings that kind of era, it's like pre-boomer or whatever, he's bringing this like this sense of entitlement to almost everything he does. That's also what makes him a really good figure, right? Like, to be a leader of sorts, you have to feel entitled to do these things. Otherwise, you don't do them.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned that he kind of dug in his heels, because as I was watching the film, I'm very open-minded. I personally haven't taken part in any of the BDSM performance aspect, but I can understand one's desire or interest or intrigue or development to get into that world. But as it proceeds, you kind of learn where he gets too big for his britches, if you will. But there is a moment where you kind of feel, like I was mentioning, cultish because of like him standing firm and not really being flexible as far as like his beliefs and his mission, if you will. And I think the documentary does a good job of highlighting that. There's not really a lot of judgment one way or the other as far as how the audience should feel about him. And as you mentioned, a lot of your films, the majority, if not all of your films over the past decade, do touch on subculture and at times aspects of taboo. What do you think it is specifically, outside of the community you mentioned, like, that really drives you to want to make films about this, to kind of highlight areas that a lot of people might not be familiar with?
I think part of it is just like curiosity. And like, curiosity is so sort of demonized these days, like you're only allowed to be curious about things that like you're part of. And I get away with this shit because I'm part of it, but also I'm just interested in it.
Sure.
I'm interested in like why we gravitate towards the ideas we gravitate towards. I'm also like always wanting to craft some sort of like affective experience. So if I can like offer a sort of trip, like I don't want to say a journey because that's a little bit too narrative for me, but like a trip, like a day trip, like starting somewhere, going somewhere else. And I want you to have big feelings while you're in the car,
Yeah.
That's what's exciting to me about the form, about cinema itself, is this capacity for having an emotional landscape beyond yourself. I try not to think of my work as too representative or comprehensive, of subculture, because there's so much that I'm playing with and teasing out that is of specific interest to me that couldn't really be spoken for in large picture.
Totally makes sense. I mean, the film itself, that it feels like a ride, like you're going on this journey and kind of learning of this new landscape, or at least, new to many, in a very informative way. But as I mentioned, not any kind of judgmental or shape how you're supposed to feel about it. I'm curious, do you remember the first artist or piece of art that really caught your attention and helped shape the type of art you produce, the type of artist you are today?
I'm thinking of something that's a really bad example, so let me talk a little bit and I can think of something better.
Okay.
But one of the things I was thinking about after I finished that thing I just said was that part of what I want to do too is that like I'm really interested in like posing lots of questions in conversation, like creating a web of questions that are sort of in conversation with each other, but I don't necessarily want to give you any answers. And I think that's part of the reason I veer towards towards objectivity a little bit. Like I know it's impossible when you're an artist or a maker of culture in any capacity, it's impossible to be objective. We know this from the ethics of documentary, blah, blah, blah. Objectivity is a myth, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's still something valuable in trying to just hold as much suspension of judgment as possible. Like trying to suspend notions at all possible corners is like a really, really valuable thing to do. And so I think that's where I come from with most of the work in terms of like just wanting there to be like nuance and like characters. I like characters. I like people to feel really complicated, like they are, which is a huge challenge to do in a film because the nature of it is obviously reductive and extractive. So how do you then, considering the limitations of reductivity and extractions, how do you then craft something that feels really holistic in the face of the form? Artist stuff. I saw a ton of art as a kid. I was a kind of art kid. I think in terms of things that really made me think differently about what was possible, there were two things. that happened around the same time, and the first one was I read Naked Lunch, which which blew my mind in a
Sure.
million pieces. For a brief window, it was masturbatory material at that
Sure.
age.
Sure.
And I was just like, this is insane. This is insane. This is insane. Someone is like being hung and then turns into a cockroach and then is having their butthole washed out. And then, you know what I mean? I was just like, I
Yeah.
was like a 14-year-old exploding. And also having really big feelings about the fact that I was exploding about this. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, what's wrong? What is wrong with me that like this is what's getting me going? And you know, so I don't know. I feel like those early experiences with art are also wrapped up in thoughts about the body, thoughts about ontogeny and growth and human transformation processes. The other thing I saw around that same time, a couple years later, was Multiple Maniacs, John Waters' first film. And I was friends with these two dykes. One was 22, and we would hang out at her apartment after school, and she would bring home videos from the video store and beer. And we would drink beer and watch video store movies. And we watched Multiple Maniacs, we watched Nowhere, Greg Araki's Nowhere, and then we watched Doom Generation. And Better Than Chocolate. A lot of the new queer cinema that was coming out then, Delta, Iris X, Delta, Go Fish, you know, Watermelon. Just like a lot of this like really underground new queer cinema that you could get at the fucking video store because
Sure.
the market was so not saturated in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, those are the early things I remember.
I love that you kind of answered my last question that I like to ask everyone. But maybe you have another one in mind. I'm always curious, what is an underseen film that you would recommend for people to check out and put on their radar, whether it is correlated to your documentary, maybe another documentary, or something just not on people's radar that you would suggest for people to catch?
Yeah, I got one for you. It's a film called Ruckus.
Okay.
It's by a filmmaker named Brett Hanover. They live in Memphis, Tennessee. And I honestly think that this is so stupid, but like maybe part of the reason why their work is underseen is because they're just like not super present in the, you know, the New York, LA shit that people are looking at. But they made a film called Ruckus, which sort of a loose, like, I don't know, hybrid documentary, part scripted, part documentary about furry community, and their own sort of like finding furry community, growing up in the South in Memphis in like punk houses and like counterculture movements and like finding furry stuff and like their relationship with this furry person they meet at a con in like Florida or some shit, and the friendship that evolves and then that person's subsequent suicide.
Oh, wow.
And it's really intense and beautiful and funny and weird. And there's like reenactments that are just like beautiful and weird. In terms of thinking about like editing as a sort of weeding practice, I think that film is a really beautiful example of editing as a weeding practice.
You've been very gracious with your time. I could keep going down this rabbit hole that the film opens. You know, we didn't even touch on pubic hair love letters, the catacombs of SF, the spiritual healing impact of a woman getting her hood re-pierced. There's just so much that this documentary has. So again, congratulations on the film. The film is
Thanks,
A
Mike.
Body to Live In. It is available for DVD and Blu-ray pre-order now and will be available for digital later this month, May 2026. If you want more info on Angelo, you can go to angelomadsen.com, or the film, you can go to abodytolivein.com. Angelo Madsen, thank you so much, and best of luck with everything moving forward.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate talking to you. Thanks for taking the time.